Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. We are at a seriously crucial juncture today. This is part 7 of our comprehensive 8-part tutorial, IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. This whole series is brought to you by Virtualization Options LLC, which is a Colorado-based technology research, education, and advisory organization. Now, this explainer is built specifically for those of you who are sysadmins or end-user tech support pros who already know your way around IPv4 troubleshooting and are now supporting your organization's migration over to IPv6. Today, we are fundamentally shifting our troubleshooting mindset entirely away from those legacy IPv4 assumptions. If you've been following along with the series, well, this is exactly where the rubber meets the road. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1. Unlearning your IPv4 habits. 2. Address assignment and NDP. 3. The importance of ICMPv6. 4. PMTUD and packet sizes. 5. Tunnels, VPNs, and containers. And finally, number 6, golden rules for IPv6.
All right, Section 1, Unlearning your IPv4 habits. Let's establish a new baseline.
Look, I know you all have years, maybe literally decades, of deeply ingrained muscle memory built entirely around IPv4, and your expertise is totally valid and incredibly useful. But to troubleshoot effectively from here on out, we have to recognize the stark contrasts of our new reality. In IPv4, you are so used to seeing a single address per interface, right? Well, in IPv6, multiple addresses are the absolute standard. What about broadcasts? Gone completely. They've been totally replaced by multicast, which means pinging 255.255.255.255 is totally meaningless now. And NAT, the thing that was basically the backbone of IPv4 security and routing, it's largely absent now because every device is potentially globally routable. That completely changes how we have to approach our firewall design and network security.
To give you an idea of what multiple addresses look like in practice, just think about a standard interface. Instead of a single IP, an IPv6 interface often has 4 different addresses attached to it, all at the exact same time. You'll have a link local address, starting with FE80, a global unicast address, and temporary privacy addresses, all just coexisting happily on the same interface. So when you see that, please do not troubleshoot it as an error. It is perfectly normal and exactly what we expect to see.
So, to actually operate in this new environment, you're going to need the right tools. Translating your basic IPv4 commands to their IPv6 counterparts across Linux, Windows, and Cisco is absolutely essential. You'll want to get very comfortable with IP-6 adder to show all those multiple addresses we literally just talked about. You'll also need IP-6 route for your routing table and IP-6 nay, which officially replaces your old ARP cache with the new NDP cache, and of course, ping6 for your base connectivity tests. You really want to keep these commands right in your back pocket.
Moving on to Section 2, Address assignment and NDP, and how devices actually connect.
Since we've established that ARP is totally gone, we need to understand how devices actually assign themselves addresses and find each other on the local network. A really crucial point here is understanding duplicate address detection, or DAD. When a host wants an address, it kicks off DAD by sending a neighbor solicitation for that tentative address over to the multicast group. Now, step 2. If another host responds, a conflict is detected and the address is flagged as DAD failed. And then step 3, the result is that you get absolutely no global connectivity. So if you run your IP-6 adjure command and you spot a DAD failed flag, this is the exact process that broke down, maybe because of a cloned VM MAC address or a blocked DAD packet.
Another critical piece of the connectivity puzzle here is router advertisements, or RAs. RAs are the messages that carry the default gateway information straight to your devices. If these get blocked, your hosts will just silently lose their default route. Remember, unlike IPv4 DHCP leases, there is absolutely no explicit gateway renewal request from the client here. The host relies entirely on the periodic RA refresh. Basically, if RAs stop, your network stops. It's that simple.
Section 3, The importance of ICMPv6. This is the unblockable protocol.
Now, in the IPv4 days, it was an incredibly common practice for sysadmins to block ICMP to try and stealth the network. Listen to me carefully. If you try that with IPv6, you will completely destroy your network's functionality. This protocol is strictly non-negotiable. Specific ICMPv6 types absolutely must be permitted on all of your firewalls. You need Type 1 for unreachable, Type 2 for packet too big, Type 3 for time exceeded, and Types 133 through 137, which handle all of the neighbor discovery protocol functions we just went over. You need to state this incredibly clearly to your security teams. Blocking these specific types will completely break NDP, path MTU discovery, and multicast membership. You simply cannot operate an IPv6 network without them. No way around it.
Section 4. PMTUD and packet sizes. The classic symptom.
Okay, this is arguably the single most common and confusing operational pain point that sysadmins face in dual-stack environments. I guarantee you, so many of you have faced this exact, totally maddening scenario. Why is it that small pings succeed perfectly, but large file transfers, SSH sessions, or HTTPS connections suddenly just hang right after the TCP handshake? It is incredibly frustrating when the network looks like it's totally up, but real work simply can't get done.
Well, the answer to that infuriating mystery is almost always a path MTU discovery or PMTUD failure. You see, PMTUD relies heavily on ICMPv6 Type 2, that's the packet too big message, to automatically adjust packet sizes when a router on the path has a smaller MTU. If a firewall is blocking that Type 2 message, the router just drops the large packets silently, and the sender literally never knows that it needs to reduce its packet size. The result? You get a complete black hole for large data transfers.
Fortunately, once you actually spot the symptom, the fix is immediate and highly actionable. Your primary option is to just permit ICMPv6 Type 2 inbound on all the firewalls in the path. But if you don't actually control the firewalls, your alternative is to configure TCP MSS clamping on your router interfaces to force smaller packets right from the start. Implement either of those, and you'll get those large SSH sessions and file transfers unstuck right away.
All right, Section 5. Tunnels, VPNs, and containers. Let's navigate some edge cases.
Now that we have the fundamentals locked in, let's wade into the messy realities of platform quirks, transition mechanisms, and containerized environments that we all have to deal with in the real world. First up, let's briefly look at NAT64 and DNS64. These are vital transition mechanisms that allow modern IPv6-only clients to reach legacy IPv4 servers. DNS64 works by synthesizing a special AAA record for an IPv4-only hostname. So when the client routes to that synthesized address, NAT64 kicks in and translates the IPv6 packet to IPv4 right at the gateway. Just a quick warning though, if you have older applications that hardcode IPv4 literal addresses, they're going to bypass DNS64 entirely, and the connection will just flat out fail.
Now you also got to watch out for specific mobile and VPN quirks. For instance, iOS rotates addresses super aggressively to prevent user tracking. If you were looking at an iOS device and it only shows a link local address, the one starting with FE80, and absolutely no global unicast address, that means router advertisements simply aren't reaching the device. We also see frequent issues with split DNS failing on VPNs where internal queries accidentally hit external servers. And always audit for split tunnel leaks, where legacy VPN clients might bypass your corporate security policies entirely for IPv6 traffic.
Another notorious edge case involves containerized environments, specifically like Docker. Sometimes Docker bridge networks can start blasting out rogue router advertisements, totally confusing hosts on the physical network. The specific solution here is to either explicitly disable IPv6 on the Docker bridge by adding IPv6:false to your docker daemon.json file, or you can implement RA-guard on your physical switch access ports to kill those rogue packets at the switch level before they cause absolute chaos.
Section 6. Golden Rules for IPv6. This is your new foundation.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. So, to really lock in this paradigm shift so you can troubleshoot with total confidence, you need to remember this set of 5 golden rules. Number 1, isolate your protocols when testing. A dual-stack failure might be completely invisible unless you're using tools like curl-6 to ensure you are actually testing the IPv6 path. 2, never block ICMPv6 entirely. Types 1, 2, 3, and 133 through 137 are non-negotiable for a functioning network. 3, remember that NDP completely replaces ARP, so you have to understand its reliance on multicast. 4, multiple addresses on a single interface are completely normal. It is not an error. And 5, always document your prefix delegation, because sudden ISP prefix changes will silently break your static configurations.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought based on everything we've covered. Have you actually fully updated your mental model?
Or are your firewalls and your troubleshooting scripts still living in an IPv4 world? Take a really hard look at your infrastructure and your daily habits. Empower yourself with this new baseline, and you'll be light years ahead. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.